all that excess capacity gets sucked out of the market. And financial service companies are now becoming broader in focus. They're looking at the client rather than just the product that they're selling. So there are just huge challenges of integration here as we look at the industry. Before we get too far along in talking about particularly the CPA's role in the future of small business capital, it's interesting to look at our past to understand where we in banking came from and what really established us as an industry. There are two different ways of viewing the business that we're in. That financial intermediaries are looked at in terms of the assets that they hold or the service that they perform. The question would be, which one is right? Well, the answer is really, there are three answers. It's either both, one, or the other. Historically, it's been both. We were the intermediaries of risk. We transferred liquid assets into illiquid assets. Because we could manage risk, or most people thought we could, and I think we've done a pretty good job, the typical person would bring their deposits to us and we would turn that into an illiquid asset in the form of a loan. Today what's happening is you have people that can manage risk very well. We think we can do that. Then you have people that perform, you have people that manufacture product. They manufacture loans, they manage risk. Then you have people that perform the service that they perform, which is the packaging of information, the knowing of the client, and you're seeing that begin to get ripped apart at the joints. You have brokers that are very much oriented toward the customer, and then you have people that make a loan. They don't really care about the customer. All they really care about is managing risk. Credit card companies are a classic example of that. If you have a credit score, as long as you meet a certain hurdle, they let someone else essentially sell their product. So that's where we're at today. The pure retailer, I would say, falls into the bottom bucket here. They perform a service. The pure retailer doesn't actually manage risk. They sell someone else's product, and someone else assumes that risk. Take a look at this. There was a book written last year called Against the Gods, and the subtitle of the book is The Remarkable History of Risk. And it's actually a fascinating read because it reads like a novel, it reads like a history book. It goes all the way back in time, before there were banks, before there were financial institutions, and just talks about the standard of living and the quality of life that people had. And the idea of risk really didn't exist. It was the place of oracles and soothsayers and people that they would appeal to see how the crops were going to do, and the future was at best just a murky view of the past. Well, along about the Renaissance, actually the period of time is from 1654 to 1760 in this book, all of the techniques employed today in risk management were created. Actually, they were created by wealthy French people primarily trying to gain an advantage in gambling. Blaise Pascal was actually contracted to try and crack the odds in a game called hazard, which today is effectively craps. So this whole idea of risk management and crossing the threshold from what is completely unknown to trying to make best guesses about the future allowed things like people to own homes. Before, only the wealthiest people could own homes. Insurance and the whole idea of risk management and insurance has allowed the average person to be able to buy a home. Loans, the predictability of risk and loss has allowed the economy really to become an engine to drive the economy because we can predict loss. Albeit, sometimes we can't predict every single, but at a portfolio level, we're pretty good at predicting loss. So again, I mean, this idea that managing risk has allowed the economies to move forward, and it's really what built our industry. And that's the business we're in, is the intermediation of risk for the most part. Next slide. Now, this is something that I think everyone is pretty much familiar with. As you start talking about the industry getting yanked apart, I don't know how many of you have had these folks knocking on your door to try and buy your firm, but I think American Express gets it. This complicated web is really a segment-focused retailer. They're after the mind of the customer. So, the CPA's role in the future of small business capital, I think this gives a fairly good glimpse of what's going on. There are lots of people who play that intermediary role of managing risk, but the customers are buying. The customers are going to buy once they have perfect information from wherever the best product is, and the retailers are going to be the ones that can take that information and bundle it on behalf of the customer and say, okay, I offer every single product, and if if you come through me, you get a piece of the action for transacting with these customers, but no one manufacturer of product, no one bank can make every single kind of loan that's the best. And you see what American Express has done. Some of the names, unfortunately, that you can't see. This is Wells Fargo's underwriting, American Express Business Credit, mutual funds, Scudder, Dreyfus, Janus, AT&T Capital Leasing, American Express Travel, MCI, Avis. I mean, it very much looks like a pickpocket. And building these webs are what the economy of the future begins to look like. So the question then becomes, is it working? You have this complicated web, what do the financial results look like? And there's kind of two ways to determine whether it looks like it's working. One is the unaided response to the question, which institution is particularly responsive to the needs of small business? The unaided response is that American Express comes to mind in the small business response more than any other, 5% more than AT&T, actually 22%. That's nationwide. We have a greater market share than American Express and business cards in the West Coast when you look at just units of business loans. But this is a scary statistic to us as products and customers have perfect information and access to any kind of product because there's a ubiquity to this. If people think they are more responsive to small business owners' needs through their website, all of their relationships, that's really the battle. They're buying up accounting firms like crazy, and you all know why they're buying them up. They're buying them up for access to information for the most part, and for that stream of assets that your clients hold, which you already have. The other issue is financial returns. American Express, over this period of time, 91 to 96, was over double the return of the S&P 500. So they're doing a lot of things right. Now, financial institutions should have a built-in advantage because we have all this information about our customers, but the reality is 83% of the time financial institutions don't know where products are held elsewhere. 60% of the time we don't know how people respond to marketing programs. And I think, again, this is where CPA firms have a huge advantage in this market in that you know your customers and that they believe that you know them better than the average person that they deal with. The whole idea of being a trusted advisor. We always used to, when we do training, we have a triangle where we'll put our commercial loan officers through it, and ideally we want them to be the third leg of that triangle. They'll have their CPA, their attorney, and their banker. In reality, when you look at the research, it's not necessarily that way. It's really the CPA is just about the entire triangle because you're perceived as knowing your clients much better than anyone else, and we really should have an advantage that way. And so what we really try and do is work with CPA firms because you do have that relationship, and if you look at the research, it's perceived that even though we have the information, we don't really know our customers very well. So what happens when the customers get disconnected? It's pretty straightforward. 15 years ago, the majority of financial assets were held in banks. Today, it's less than a third. Credit card issuers, largest ones, MBNA, et cetera, they're just not banks. AAA, they're taking deposits and making loans now. And I just heard that UPS, have you heard about this? UPS is financing, they're essentially factoring the COD shipments for customers. They're getting into this whole, again, this intermediation of this management of risk. Our clients that we typically would finance their inventory, their receivables, UPS has gone one step upstream, and now they're going to plug themselves in as a financial services provider. To me, it's just fascinating. Microsoft, this to me is one of the scariest things coming down the pipe. They're using words like financial services DNA and digital nervous system. They really want to embed themselves and just tattoo themselves into the genetic code of every financial transaction and become the intermediary. I don't know. Any of you go to the Microsoft conference that they do with public accounting? They hold these seminars all over the place, and they get it. I think they know that with their market share and their credibility in the market, they carry a lot of weight. But Microsoft is very much trying to pander to the accounting community because they know the position that you hold in the minds of your clients. So, one other thing about Microsoft that's interesting is that Bill Gates,